2, 1, go. Careful. What are you doing? Are you okay?
Hello and welcome to Power Drifting, the rally game podcast. This is Special Stage 3. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm not too bad, Tom. I'm looking forward to another episode of rallying fun.
How are things over on your side of the digital cockpit?
It's good. Pace notes are ready. I'm ready for some sharp corners and some trees coming far too close to my window. and that's just the wind outside. So,
Okay, Mike, we have correspondence.
Excellent.
For those people who have been with us on this journey from the start line, we covered the Nintendo Switch and iOS game Rush Rally 3 in the last episode. And after we published that episode, Stephen Brown, the developer of Rush Rally 3, heard the podcast, got in touch and wanted to address some of the things that we raised in that particular episode. So I'm just going to read his email, not quite verbatim, but some of the points that we raised. First one was about the amount of different settings in the Switch version. He says the reason that I added the settings is because some people like to play with high resolution but with the detail down. Others prefer high detail and a low resolution. I think it's better to let the user to be able to play with these rather than for me to force how it should be. That's fair enough, I suppose. Lowering the settings will give you up to 4 times more battery life. That's something I didn't actually consider with the Switch version. It's the battery life. Obviously, it's a handheld system. I generally play mine docked. I don't know about you, Mike.
I always play my handheld, so it's interesting to know that it saves battery, yeah.
He did say that he agrees with us, our concerns with the AI, but he can assure us that they do not cheat. Each track is driven by the AI in every bracket of car offline, and these ghost times are built into the game. The AI may try different gearing, etc., to get the best time possible. However, he can guarantee cars in the game don't cheat. So I will stand corrected. Apologies, Stephen, Brown Monster. For those people who haven't listened yet, go back and listen. It's episode 2, or Special Stage 2. That's Rush Rally 3, the best rally game on the Nintendo Switch. Okay, now we've got that out of the way. Let's move to the present. Well, I say the present, we're actually going back to the turn of the millennium, Mike. Are you ready to jump back in time?
I am. I was waiting for some weird sound effect, some sort of blah, 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 but no, it didn't happen.
Sorry about that. The budget cannot stretch to sound effects. Well, apart from the ones that I record off my TV with my iPhone and then edit into the podcast. Yes, this time we're going back in time to the late 90s and the early 2000s with a quick look at V-Rally 2. So yes, V-Rally 2, first released on the PlayStation in 1999 and then released on the Dreamcast and the PC in 2000. This game was developed by Eden Studios and published by Infogrames. Mike, are you aware of the really weird naming conventions of this game, like in the US and over here in Europe?
I am, yeah. So it's many names, a game by many names. That's what we should call it.
Yes, yeah, it is. There's another game that I can think of that's quite similar to this with many names, and that's Monaco Grand Prix on the Dreamcast. I think it got about 8 names. It's either Racing Simulation Monaco Grand Prix or Monaco Grand Prix 2 Racing Simulation.
It's got names in like Germany. It's a different name than it is in the UK. Yeah, I think there's a few racing games like it around that sort of time. I'm guessing mainly due to licensing for many of them.
Yeah, so in the United States, the first game on the PlayStation 1 is called Need for Speed V-Rally, and in Europe and PAL territories, it's known as V-Rally 2 Championship Edition. The Dreamcast and PC version is called V-Rally 2 Expert Edition in the PAL territories, but it's called Test Drive V-Rally in the US, and it's something to do with the way that the different Test Drive and Need for Speed names had more kind of weight over in the United States. There's a video by a YouTuber called Casey, that's K-A-C-E-Y, who does a really good deep dive on V-Rally 2 and all of the sort of mystery surrounding this weird naming convention. But it's well worth a watch if you get the chance to have a look at his video. So yeah, as alluded to by the name, V-Rally 2 is the sequel to the 1997 PlayStation game V-Rally. It was also released in 1998 on the Nintendo 64. Mike, before we get on to V-Rally 2, did you ever play V-Rally, the original?
I don't think I did, no. I don't think, didn't have a PS1.
I played the Nintendo 64 version, which was called V-Rally 99. And I was aware of the PlayStation version, but I didn't have a PlayStation sort of at that time. I had a Nintendo 64, so when it came to the N64, I was like, yes, an actual rally game. I don't have to keep playing Multi-Racing Championship, which was a bit duff, in my opinion. It was quite nice to get an actual rally game for the N64. We're not talking about the N64, we're talking about the PlayStation, the Dreamcast and the PC. We're talking about V-Rally 2 Championship Edition / Expert Edition. And yeah, as I say, it was released in 1999 and 2000 on respective consoles. And it's based around the 1999 World Rally Championship, but it doesn't actually have any official WRC license, which seems to be quite a common occurrence around that time period. It's weird because it does mention the WRC, but it's not the actual WRC itself. It's basically a class of cars, which it just calls World Rally Championship style cars.
Yeah.
There are 17 vehicles, which are split across different classes. You've got the WRC, you've got the kit cars, 1.6 and 2 litre. And you can also unlock some quite incredible Group B and retro style rally cars. Mike, can you recall when you first became aware of V-Rally 2? Was it the PlayStation version or was it the Dreamcast version that you played first, or indeed the PC version?
PC, I think it was PC version. I think probably just from a demo, possibly on PC Game Magazine back in the day. Don't think I played it. I think I probably skipped to V-Rally 3 on the Xbox. So I didn't actually play V-Rally 2 until about 10 years ago on Dreamcast.
Okay. I can recall having V-Rally 2 on the PlayStation and the Dreamcast at the same time. And it was one of those games that kind of really made me realise just how much of a leap ahead the Dreamcast was over the PlayStation.
Yeah.
Because side by side, we will talk a little bit about the differences in these two games in a little bit. But the graphics really were the main kind of upgrade of the original PlayStation version for me. But we'll come to that in a second. Gameplay modes, there are 4 of them. You've got an arcade mode, a V-Rally mode, a championship, and a time attack. There are 12 countries, each with 7 special stages in each. The time of day, though, is kind of locked on each course, so each special stage is either played during the morning, afternoon, or night, and it's the same with the weather, which I always thought was a bit weird, the way that you can't just change the weather or the time of day.
Yeah, I think it's probably been spoilt by games that have done it since, possibly. I don't think Colin McRae had a change of weather, did it, on each track?
Without going back and playing it now, I couldn't tell you. Yeah, it's well, I say that. I mean, I recently played WRC Arcade on the PlayStation, and that had the same kind of thing where the weather and the time of day was kind of locked to the course that you were playing. You couldn't change them. But as you say, I think we are quite spoilt these days because everything is just so customizable.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've mentioned the 4 game modes. Arcade is kind of like a standard, as you would imagine, against the clock and also against some competitor vehicles. V-Rally Trophy is almost like a rallycross, but played on the same stages that the standard championships are played on. Championship is a bog standard, as you would imagine in a WRC game, where you just do point-to-point races on your own against the clock. And time attack is the same, but without a championship built around it. What's interesting about V-Rally 2, on the Dreamcast at least, is that it's only one of 2 officially released rally games, the other one being Sega Rally.
Yeah.
There was also the cancelled Colin McRae Rally 2 for the Dreamcast, but that, as we know, was cancelled quite late in development.
Which of course, Tom, you're one of the few people to actually play.
I am indeed, yes. I'll talk about that more on the actual Colin McRae episode that we've got planned for the future. But this is quite a departure from Sega Rally 2. It's almost erring more towards kind of simulation side of things, especially with the game modes and the amount of vehicles and the real world settings. However, I just don't think it plays as well as Sega Rally. I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. But should we talk about the differences in the games between the PlayStation and the Dreamcast version?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Matt, did you say you've only played the Dreamcast version?
I've only played Dreamcast version. I think I might have touched on the PS1 version a few years ago. Just sort of bought it, but I don't remember too much about it.
In preparation for this episode, I did dabble with the PlayStation version and the Dreamcast just to kind of refresh my memory because it's been quite a while since I've played either version. Mm-hmm. And what kind of struck me was the subtle differences than the major ones, of which there are many. But the subtle differences are things like the menu screens look slightly different, and the in the game, if you've never played V-Rally, when you create your own profile, you get to choose a car that you start the game with. You don't have to like buy them with cash or anything. You can just change your car at will whenever you like. But there's almost like a test track. And in the PlayStation version, you're on this kind of like coastal road with the sea in the background. But on the Dreamcast, you're in like this kind of almost like a rural setting with like fields and cottages and things. It's just little changes like that things that really interest me. I don't know why, but that was something that kind of stuck out. Elsewhere, you've got obviously better graphics in the Dreamcast version. You've got damage in the Dreamcast version that doesn't appear in the PlayStation version. And one of the biggest changes, visual changes, is that there's a fully modelled cockpit view in the Dreamcast game that doesn't appear in the PlayStation game. I wonder why they did that. I mean, do you reckon it was something to do with the extra horsepower of the Dreamcast, or? I
think so. I think again, we're spoilt by cockpit views, aren't we? I think because. Even at the time, a lot of games had cockpit views that were very basic, sort of just a picture of the inside of the car while it's driving. This is a proper 3D modelled interior, which is actually quite, a lot of games if we're talking about Dreamcast, a lot of games on Dreamcast didn't have that mode. I got very excited a few years ago by a game coming out, an indie game which had a cockpit view, because there's very few games on Dreamcast which have a proper cockpit view.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them do have a bonnet cam, don't they? But no cockpit. Yeah. Another one that I would like to have seen a proper full cockpit in was Le Mans.
I mean, that would have been brilliant, yeah.
Yeah, that would have been excellent. And incidentally, that game is another one that was released by Infogrames in the US under the Test Drive name.
Yeah.
So let's move on to some of the bigger differences. And for me, the main one, the differences between the two different ports of this game. I say ports. The Dreamcast and PC version is more of like what you would consider a full remaster in this day and age.
And again, quite similar to Le Mans, isn't it? Because Le Mans was on the PS1 first of all, which was a very different game, I believe, than the actual ones that came afterwards. So
the biggest difference for me out of these two games is that the gameplay in the PlayStation version for me is actually slightly better than the Dreamcast version. The PlayStation version, the cars seem to have a lot more weight, and it's the handling model. It seems to be easier and more satisfying to actually make the cars drift around corners. The big thing for me in rally games is drifting. There's nothing like a nice long power slide through a corner, and V-Rally 2 on the PlayStation gets this perfect. Now, if you've played both versions and you put the Dreamcast version on, what you get there is, again, this is just my opinion, but super twitchy controls, and the cars feel like they've got no weight to them, which kind of harks back to the original V-Rally in some ways. One of my biggest bugbears with the original game was that if you even clip a blade of grass at the side of the course, you will invariably find your car either flipping on its roof or at the very least spinning around and facing back the wrong way. Which is absolutely infuriating, especially if you're doing quite well. That game is it's a testament to how well your patience can withstand being flipped around or your car flipping through the air again just as you clip a little bit of the side of the course.
Yeah, I think the Dreamcast version has that quite a lot as well. I hope I don't actually turn my car over that much when I'm playing other rally games, but in V-Rally 2 I've done it a lot. I think it does feel sometimes like it feels to me like you're sort of playing with Hot Wheels. You know what I mean? You're throwing a car down a sort of plastic track, because sometimes the car will just literally go on its nose. It will just literally tip up over its nose for no reason I can see, really. And because it's perhaps not as, and this is Dreamcast only, the Dreamcast is so floaty, it's sometimes hard to judge how to take corners.
Yeah, and also the camera seems to have this tendency where when you turn, the camera kind of sort of swings out to the opposite side of the car.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, and it can be quite hard to judge, where the car is in relation to the to the walls or the barriers. Again, this doesn't really happen in the PlayStation version. And I don't know if it's because, even though they're from the same developer, Eden Studios, I don't know if this is because the PlayStation game came first and then they decided to make the Dreamcast version a little bit more arcadey because of the audience that the Dreamcast was mainly playing to, with a lot of arcade ports and that kind of thing. But it'd be very interesting to speak to somebody maybe who worked on both games to see why they changed the handling model so much between the two games.
It feels to me like almost like they didn't realise how powerful the console was. It almost feels like it's running, when you play an emulator and you don't cap the frame rate.
Yeah.
It feels like that to me. It feels like it's actually running faster than it should actually run.
That's a good point. That's a very good point, actually. And
yeah.
Now you mention it, it does feel like that. It feels like it's a little bit sped up too fast.
The game to me, the first 10 minutes I play the game, I always go, oh, the controls are so floaty, they're so weird. After a while, I get used to it, and after a while, I really love it. But it does feel constantly like you're playing a game sped up, and that's quite unique, I think, within rally games, because I don't think another rally game which does the same sort of thing. So it just feels like you're on. It feels very slippery. The entire all the tracks seem really, really slippery to me. And I thought first of all it's just poor programming. That they haven't really done the modelling of the surfaces properly. But looking back at it, definitely it does feel like they haven't capped something, and something is just going too fast. The reason I think it's because of that, and not just because of poor programming, is because as you're actually doing the tracks themselves, especially things like the British Rally, when you're going over big hills, you can see that the car is just feels like it's going too fast. And if you notice the actual speed, the speedometer when you're actually in the game, doesn't really match up that well with what you'd expect that kind of speed to be. Now, I know that obviously this is an old game, so every game was like this. I remember games on the Mega Drive saying you were going at 700 miles an hour, and it felt like you were walking through treacle. But it feels to me like they just something hasn't quite worked. Now, I can't remember the PC version that well, whether the PC version had the ability to in some way change the graphic settings. And so obviously they had higher graphics quality for slightly lower frame rate. Maybe that's the reason. And then when they ported to the Dreamcast, maybe they didn't sort of take that into account. I don't know. I'm saying ported to Dreamcast because I don't know whether the PC version and Dreamcast version are the exact same, I have to say.
Good points, yeah, good points. That's not to say that the game isn't a great example of a sort of early 2000s rally game. It's one of the better ones, and it's still a lot of fun to play.
Yes.
Going back to the sort of differences and the similarities between the two games, both games on both consoles have the ability to play 4-player split screen. Obviously, the Dreamcast as standard because it has 4 controller ports. But interestingly, the PlayStation 1 version also has a 4-player split screen, which is accessible via a multi-tap, which is, for a console of that power, quite impressive. I know it had a port of things like Quake 2, 4-player modes, and obviously things like Crash Team Racing, a 4-player. But for a rally game to have a 4-player split screen via the multi-tap is quite impressive for that hardware. Okay, Mike, it's interesting that you mentioned that the frame rate feels a little bit uncapped in the Dreamcast version. I've also noticed something that kind of annoyed me slightly with this game, specifically the Dreamcast game, is that when you pull the brake, it almost puts the car into like a full revs style thing, and it seems like it's a glitch. I will put some audio into the podcast so you can hear what I'm talking about, but every time you pull the brake, the car defaults to full revs.
I love the Dreamcast version. I'll go out there now. I think so far all I've done is moan about it, but I love the Dreamcast version. It's one of my favourite games on Dreamcast, and I do have quite a big love for it. It's to me, it's one of those. It's a really fun game. It's for all of its faults, all of its foibles, all of its tiny little niggles, and there are lots of things the game doesn't do as well as something like a Colin McRae 2 and 3 on the PS2 and Xbox. But actually, it's just a fun arcade game, and I do feel like it's. If it had the Sega Rally name attached to it, I think we would have really had a game which would probably been one of the most well-remembered games on the Dreamcast. I think it's that kind of it's a really fun arcade type game which actually has some depth as well. I know we'll probably talk about depth, and as always, I'll talk about the random geography facts that I do. But to me, it's got some. It's not as bad a game as I'm possibly making out, which is the second time in a podcast so far I've said that. But it is a game which I think. I don't know about you, Tom, but I think a lot of people view some older racing games almost like sports titles,
right,
in terms of the fact that they don't play them because they're old. They've been bettered since. And I think that's the wrong approach to things. I think, especially with rally games, older rally games can be just as much fun as new games, simply because of the fact they do a completely different approach to it. They're not going for the overly sim-orientated approach. They're not going for handling, which is as perfect as they can make it. They just make fun racing games. I think Rally 2 on the Dreamcast does do that.
Yeah. I just want to echo what you said there as well about it was maybe putting a bit of a downer on this. This is actually a really great game, so don't let us put you off with the things we've touched on that are maybe not quite perfect. One thing you mentioned there, Mike, was the environments in the game. Now, because the game is spread across so many different countries, you do get a massive variety in the different courses that you can race on, and within those countries there are 7 tracks in each one, so you do get a lot of gameplay here. And I mean, all of the countries that the World Rally Championship takes place in are actually covered here. So there's a vast array of different landscapes that you can race across. I mean, there's like desert and arid tracks, and there's forests, Finland and that kind of thing. And you've got the snowy worlds of Sweden. And then obviously there's like the British Rally with the Wales courses represented. So yeah, there's a great amount of variety in the courses and the vehicles. So that's really nice to see.
Yes, they match the countries quite well as well. The Finnish Rally, which is known by obviously, I think apart from the British Rally, it's probably the most popular sort of rally stage on any game.
Oh, it's mate, as soon as I get a new rally game, the first stage I go to, the first country I go to play is Finland. If they get Finland right, then I'm in. Do you know what I mean? And I think this game does it, to be honest.
I think actually you've hit the nail on the head there. I think it's very similar to Monaco on any Formula One game. The first track you do is always that to see, because it pushes it. Finland's full of trees, and as soon as you race a finish stage, you know that you're going to have trees next to your car the entire way, and usually some jumps in the middle as well. And I think it does that really, really well. And actually, that entire rally plays really, really well with this game. I think it all the strengths of the game work quite well with that one. But also they got some really interesting ones. So a lot around the turn of the century, the WRC went to Indonesia, which is not in the more modern games now. But that's a really nice sort of jungle stage. The environments look really good, and they match the environments. The British Rally, I think it was the Welsh Rally, I think at the time, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's all the stages do look really, really good. You've got Corsica, you've got, I think, Sardinia as well, haven't you? So that's really nice, and it does feel like they have tried to make it look like where it's meant to be.
Okay, Mike, it's time to have a look at some of the contemporary review scores that were awarded to V-Rally 2 on both the PlayStation and the Dreamcast back in the day, and then we'll give our own little summaries. So I've got a review here from IGN. IGN reviewed the game, and they gave it an 8.5 out of 10, and the verdict says, Eden Studios, Infogrames, EA and the Need for Speed team deserve quite a bit of credit for making such a full-on speedy racer here. Rally games have a lot of variables to deal with, including terrain types, vehicle model designs, roadside detail, and car handling and auto physics. So to do all of that so well and still be faster than all get out is pretty stunning. Only hardcore sim fans will be let down by the game, but if it's a race you want, you'll find one here well worth your time. I believe you've got a magazine there for the Dreamcast version.
Yeah, so I've got this is the UK official Dreamcast magazine, May 2000. So they gave it a 7 out of 10. The verdict was screamingly quick, which is a great phrase. A great drive, but not quite what it could have been. They gave them some uppers, which are astonishingly fast and good looking, loads of cars and tracks, and simple course designer. And the downers, which are missing the little touches, which is a very vague summary. Lacks real competition structure, which is not true, and some graphical glitches, which I do agree with.
Yeah, just on that topic, one of the graphical glitches that sticks in my mind is on the snowy courses where the track kind of breaks up and you can see like the white sort of skybox beneath it. That's on the Dreamcast version.
Yeah, this weirdly, and this is slightly going off topic slightly, but my copy of V-Valley 2, I've got two copies of V-Valley 2. Neither of them get past the Corsica Rally. Neither will play. It will freeze at the Corsica Rally stage. I've got the white label, which is a promo disc for the game. That works fine. I've also got it on a CF reader on Dreamcast, which works fine. But I've never actually been able to get a retail copy of V-Valley 2 to get past a certain stage. Now, whether that shows that the disc is perhaps not manufactured great. I know that there's a couple of discs on Dreamcast which run quite badly. But I've tried it on like 11 consoles. I've never been able to get past a certain stage on Dreamcast, which is really weird. But I think that shows possibly they alluded to it in that review that the game should have required a few more months just preparation.
It's an interesting point. I remember a similar thing happened with a game that I had called Stunt GP. You could get through the entire championship mode until the very last race, and the very last race wouldn't load, which really annoyed me because I'd played through like 30 odd races to get to the final championship race decider, and it wouldn't load no matter what console I played it on, and it was with different copies of the game as well because I bought another one off eBay and that wouldn't work either. So maybe it was a manufacturing problem. Anyway, let's give our own verdicts. I think, should we give two scores, but you've not played the PlayStation version, so I'm not sure you can do that. But I will. I will give the PlayStation version can we give 0.5? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to give the PlayStation version a 7.5, just because I prefer the handling. And I'm going to give the Dreamcast version a 7, because the handling's not quite as good, but it looks about 1,000 times better. What about you, Mike?
I think for me, looking at doing this episode is sort of reminded me some of the things that do annoy me about the game, but at the same time I really love it. So I'm going to give the game a 7 as well.
Wow, so then 7s all around then. Quite a respectable score there for V-Rally 2. Check it out if you get the chance on either PlayStation or Dreamcast. And if you've got the PC version and we've got things wrong, please do let us know. You can let us know on Twitter @PowerDriftPod, or you can find all of our episodes on the interwebs at www.powerdriftingpodcast.com. Also, feel free to leave us a review on iTunes. I think we've got 2 reviews on iTunes at the moment. So yeah, we've got 2 reviews on iTunes so far. Thank you to those who did spend the time to give us a review. We've got one from Stevie Thunder, which is an awesome name. He gives us 5 stars. Got to love a racing game podcast. Great knowledge from the guys and sharing their similar experiences. And we've also got one from Candid Gamer, 5 stars. Brilliant debut episode from an obviously knowledgeable hosting crew. That's me and you, Mike, I believe. Really looking forward to hearing more as time goes on. Thank you very much, Candid Gamer. That's great. If you'd like to leave us a review, you can find us on iTunes. You can also find us on Spotify. And I think that will do it for this episode. Anything else you want to say, Mike?
I'm fine. What I would say very quickly is anyone on Twitter wants to give us some suggestions of what games to cover in future, feel free to drop us a message.
Excellent. Okay, we will see you next time on Power Drifting, the Rally Game Podcast.